Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. The Wild West. Dusty saloons, outlaw duels, creaking wagons, and lonesome harmonicas, right? That's the movie version. But tonight's story isn't about high noon shootouts or shiny sheriff stars. This is the other Wild West. The one nobody sings songs about. The cold, creaking, teeth-chattering version that crept in once the sun dipped below the prairie horizon and every glowing campfire suddenly seemed too small. So before we freeze together in the past, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy the weird mix of sleepy stories and harsh history we do here. And hey, drop a comment and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. I always love seeing the night owls and insomniacs from around the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, like the wind slipping through the cracks of an old frontier cabin. Or better yet, imagine the sound of prairie grass rustling outside your tent flap. Either way, get comfortable. We're slipping out of your modern bed and into something much colder, much rougher, and infinitely more drafty. Tonight's journey, how a freezing night alone in the Wild West might have actually gone. Forget the glamour. Tonight, you're not a cowboy with a silver revolver. You're just a solitary traveler caught out between distant outposts. Your horse is tired, your coat is thin, and nightfall comes fast when there's nothing but empty plains in every direction. There's no motel, no gas station, no warm diner with coffee and pie. Just you, a fire that keeps trying to go out, and a sky full of stars that does absolutely nothing to help your situation. And that's the heart of tonight's journey. Not the wild of the West, but the quiet, brutal, frozen loneliness of it. The wind that never stops, the cold that climbs under your skin, the sounds in the dark you pretend not to hear, the kind of night where you start to wonder if you'll ever feel warm again, or if you ever really were. Over the next couple hours, we'll walk through what it might have felt like to survive a night alone out there. No exaggerations, no six-shooters, just survival and discomfort at its most honest. From what you'd be wearing, spoiler, not nearly enough, to what you'd try to eat, to the bone-deep fear that comes with every distant howl or crack of frozen branch. It's not horror. It's not action. It's just history, the slow, boring, miserable kind. But it's also what countless people actually lived through, night after night, hoping they'd wake up and not be buried in frost, snow, or something worse. So curl up, pull your blanket tight. You're going to miss that warm mattress soon. Because out here, in the Wild West, comfort didn't ride into town very often. And warmth, well, that was always just one spark away from vanishing. Let's begin. The cold hits first, sharp, merciless, and already inside your bones before you even understand what's happening. You didn't wake up so much as snap awake, like your body finally gave up trying to sleep through the pain. It's not just cold. It's a kind of silence that's been frozen stiff. You're not in a house. There are no walls, no roof, just a threadbare bedroll, a thin wool blanket that's more of a suggestion than insulation, and the thin crust of snow forming on the brim of your hat. The fire you built hours ago? Gone. Just a small black hole in the ground, edged with frost and dead ash. A few twisted logs stand around it like mourners at a funeral. You slept on the ground. Dirt, rocks, snow. The kind of hard-packed prairie that laughs at your spine. There's no mattress, not even straw. Just whatever canvas tarp you managed to throw down over the icy earth before your fingers stopped working properly. Your back aches. Your shoulders burn. Your legs feel like they were carved out of timber during the night, frozen stiff and splintered by the cold. The joints crack like old leather as you sit up, slow, careful, like a man trying not to tear something that can't be put back. You don't speak. You don't yawn. You don't even groan. Your breath comes out in white clouds, and you just stare at it for a moment, the only warmth you can still see. And then the sounds. The wind, always the wind, thin and sharp, whispering through the dry grasses and between the rocks, like it's got something nasty to say. Somewhere off to your left, maybe 20 feet away, your horse snorts. A quiet, miserable sound. You can't see him yet, but you know he's still tied to that bare tree you hobbled him to last night. He's survived the night too, barely. His ears will be stiff, his breath steaming, his hooves cold as the grave. A coyote cries out in the distance, high, sharp, lonely. You go very still, not out of fear, not yet, just instinct. The way animals pause when they hear something hungry on the horizon. You rub your eyes with gloves that are already stiff with ice. Everything hurts. Your hands, your knees, even your face feels bruised. Wind-burned, cracked, raw around the lips. Your beard, if you've got one, is laced with frost. Your nose is numb. You're not entirely sure your toes are still part of your body. There's no clock to check, no phone. You know the time by the color of the sky. A pale gray light just beginning to spill across the horizon, like someone spilled milk over a frozen canvas. Dawn is coming, but it's not here yet. You still have time. Time to get warm. Time to eat something. Time to remember where exactly you are. Because you don't really know. Not exactly. You were following a trail westward. Some rumor about gold or work or a cousin's cousin who said there was land out this way that nobody had claimed yet. But the map you had wasn't worth the grease it was printed on. The river you camped beside yesterday turned into a frozen trickle overnight. The dirt road became a path. The path became a rut. And then it was just prairie. Empty. Cold. Beautiful, sure. In that indifferent way the West always is. But completely unforgiving. You were supposed to reach a town by yesterday. Some lonely outpost with a blacksmith and maybe a doctor who didn't charge in chickens. But your horse threw a shoe. Or maybe you just misjudged the miles. Either way, you ended up here, somewhere out in the nowhere between nowhere and good luck. You shiver again. Not a little twitch, but a full-body rattle. The kind that makes your teeth knock together and your arms fold across your chest, like you're trying to hold in whatever warmth might be hiding under your ribs. Your gear is next to you. A saddlebag half buried in frost. A canteen that might be frozen solid. A crust of jerky. A flint box. A rusted tin cup. You reach for the blanket again, thinking you'll wrap it around your shoulders. But it's stiff, brittle. More like frozen parchment than fabric. You drop it. There's no point. Instead, you start moving, slowly, carefully. because that's the first rule of freezing mornings in the West. Move, or you don't. The ground crunches beneath your boots. Your fingers feel like fat sausages inside your gloves. Your joints don't bend properly. You stamp your feet, trying to get the blood flowing. The pain comes next, sharp, stabbing, like knives sliding back into nerves that had politely gone to sleep during the night. Your toes feel like they're being set on fire from the inside out. You welcome it. Pain means you're not dead. You shuffle over to the fire pit. The ash is cold. The coals are dead. You dig through the frozen clumps with a stick. Nothing. No heat. You'll have to start it from scratch. You crouch. Your knees scream. Your hands shake. You pull the flint and steel from your pouch, trying to strike a spark. The wind makes it miserable. It blows the tiniest flames out before they're even born. You build a little nest of dry grass, whatever you packed in your pocket from the last town you passed, if you were smart enough to think ahead. If not, you'll have to scrounge. Dry cow dung, dead weeds, bark. Eventually, with enough swearing and shivering and shaking hands, a flame catches. Tiny, pitiful. But it's a start. You huddle close to it, shielding it with your body. You watch the fire take hold, slowly, hungrily. And for the first time since you opened your eyes, you feel a flicker of hope. Not warmth, not yet, but hope. You think about coffee. You don't have any. You think about bacon. You definitely don't have that either. You think about soft beds and stoves and windows that don't let wind in. And you wonder, briefly, why you ever left. But the West doesn't care about your second thoughts. The sun is coming up, and the frost is beginning to sparkle on everything around you. A beautiful, deadly sparkle. The fire crackles. Your horse nickers. The wind keeps talking. And you're still here. There's a very specific kind of hunger that comes after a freezing night outdoors. Not the kind where you dream of pancakes or warm biscuits. Not even the kind where you get angry or lightheaded. No, this is survival hunger. A deep, gnawing emptiness. Like your insides are quietly dissolving themselves in protest. But first, you have to convince your fingers to function. You fumble with the saddlebag, your gloves stiff with frost, your nails dark with dirt, and whatever else you picked up sleeping like a coyote in an open grave. You paw through your supplies. Not that there's much to paw through. You find a tin of hardtack, some jerky, a pouch of beans you can't cook because, let's face it, the fire you just lit is barely more than a suggestion. You stare at the hardtack, hard as a horseshoe, dry as sin. You smack it against your saddle horn just to prove a point. It doesn't even crack. It's a biscuit, allegedly. But really, it's survival cement. Flour, water, and salt, baked until it's devoid of joy. You put a piece in your mouth and immediately regret it. Your teeth creak in protest. Your jaw does its best to saw through the brick. It's like chewing on sandstone. It tastes like flour that died of boredom and came back as a ghost. You swallow a chunk, barely. It goes down like gravel wrapped in shame. You reach for the jerky next. It's a little easier to manage, though not by much. It's beef, probably. You dried it yourself weeks ago over a low fire and forgot about seasoning entirely. It's tough, sinewy, a fight from the first bite. Still, it's salty. which is something. A distraction for your tongue, if not comfort for your soul. You drink from the canteen. The water inside is no longer frozen, but it's not warm either. It's metal-flavored, bracing, and tastes faintly of the old leather pouch it's been sloshing around in since the Dakota Territory. You take a small sip. You can't waste it. There's no stream nearby. And if there is, it's probably iced solid and crawling with bacteria that'll make you pray for death by snow instead. Breakfast is over in about 5 minutes, and you're somehow more tired than when you started. And now, hygiene, or what passes for it out here. Let's be clear. This is not a world of toothbrushes and minty mouthwash. You don't have a bathroom. You don't have a sink. What you do have is a frozen metal cup, a sliver of soap you carved off a bar back in Missouri, and a very real chance of frostbite if you try anything fancy. You scrape a bit of snow into your hand and rub it across your face. It's like being slapped by God. The wind sneaks under your collar. Your skin feels raw, chapped, and filthy. Not in the poetic, rugged way, just in the, I've been sleeping in dirt for 4 nights and haven't touched water that wasn't half ice since Tuesday way. Your face isn't clean, it's just cold. That's all the West offers. Cold and more cold. You spit into the grass, what little of it you can see, and wipe your mouth on your sleeve. That's brushing your teeth, frontier style. No paste, no bristles, just hope and friction. If you're feeling luxurious, you might scrape your tongue with the tip of your knife. You might rinse your mouth with stale whiskey. You might chew a sliver of pine bark. It doesn't help. It just makes you feel like you tried. There's a rag in your pack, stiff with old soap and regrets. You wipe your hands, your neck, the inside of your shirt collar. Everything smells like smoke, sweat, and mule. You could bathe, in theory, if there were a creek nearby and you wanted to strip down in 29-degree air and tempt death just to rinse off 3 days of grime. Spoiler, you don't. And what about using the bathroom? The real morning business? You shuffle a few yards into the brush. You look for privacy, but honestly, there's nothing out here that cares. The nearest human is probably a day's ride away, and the jackrabbit watching you doesn't seem judgmental. You take care of things quickly. No toilet paper, obviously. Just snow, a handful of grass, or if you're unlucky, an old page from a map you already can't read. The wind hits your backside like a slap from an angry ghost. Your eyes water. Your dignity freezes in place and breaks off like icicles. You shuffle back to camp. Your boots are wet now. Your fingers are shaking again. You breathe deep, not because the air is fresh, but because your lungs are trying to remind you you're still alive. You stretch, or try to. Everything cracks. Your back feels like it was used to prop up a barn. Your legs have a permanent ache, the kind that no amount of fire will ever quite burn out. Your clothes, damp, crusty, layered, but not warm. Wool long johns, a flannel shirt with buttons made of bone, a buffalo hide coat that smells like its last owner, and a scarf knitted so badly it looks like it lost a fight with a raccoon. Your socks are stiff, your boots are stiff, and somewhere in the dark of the night, your sense of humor packed up and rode east. Still, you survived. For now. You crouch by the fire. Your horse stirs again. You take out your tin cup, pour the last bit of water in, and nestle it near the embers. Maybe it'll warm. Maybe it'll boil. Probably it'll just absorb smoke until it tastes like ash and regret. But it's yours, and it's hot, and that's rare. You look west, toward whatever trail you're hoping to find again. You've got a few hours of travel before the sun drops again, before another night like this starts creeping in behind your boots. So you eat your bricks. You drink your smoke-flavored water. You scrub your teeth with shame. You spit into the wind. And you get ready to move. You're already wearing everything you own. Not everything you packed. Not your warmest outfit. No guatsa. Everything. Because in the Wild West, especially in the colder seasons, clothing wasn't fashion. It was armor. Against wind. Against cold. Against the fact that if the temperature dropped too much farther, your own body might start giving up one toe at a time. Let's start with the underlayer. You've got a set of long johns, heavy wool if you were lucky at the trading post, homespun if you weren't. Either way, they itch like they were woven by angry sheep. The kind of itch that doesn't just bother your skin, it haunts it. After a few hours of sweat and saddle rub, you'll feel like you're being slowly sandpapered by something with opinions. Over that, a shirt, plain cotton or flannel, missing buttons, frayed at the cuffs. It's stained with a dozen things you don't have names for, and some you'd rather not remember. There's probably blood on it somewhere. Yours or someone else's. It doesn't matter. Then comes your outer layer. A coat made from buffalo hide or deerskin, thick and weather-beaten. It was never soft, but now it feels like wearing a wet log. Heavy, cracked, and stiff at the joints. The inside might have a bit of old sheepskin left in the lining, if moths or mice didn't get to it first. It smells like wet dog and gunpowder, which is honestly a compliment in this part of the world. Your pants, canvas or leather, thick enough to block wind, useless against the cold. The seams rub your thighs raw after a day's ride. Your belt is worn to the last hole. Your suspenders, if you have them, are a mismatched pair of straps held together with hope and rusty clips. Your boots are your most important possession. Tall, stitched leather, stiff in the cold, cracked at the toes. The soles have been patched with scrap more times than you can count. You stuff newspaper or dry grass inside to block the wind. That lasts until you step in a puddle, which you always do. And the socks? One pair. Wool. Damp. Always damp. You don't remember the last time they were dry. If you ever manage to wring them out near a fire, steam rises like the breath of the dead. You wear them anyway. The alternative is frostbite, and you've already seen what that looks like. You wrap a scarf around your neck, not for warmth, but to keep the wind from sawing through your throat like a bandit with a vendetta. It's scratchy. It smells like old stew and worse horses, but it's yours. That makes it valuable. And on your head? A wide-brimmed hat. Maybe felt, maybe leather, maybe just fabric held together with desperation. It blocks the sun in summer and catches snow in winter. It's heavy with frost, crusted with trail dust, and you'd rather lose your left hand than let it blow off in the wind. Not because it's precious, but because it's all that stands between your ears and the elements. And ears freeze faster than you'd like to believe. But the clothing only gets you so far, because when the sun goes down, the temperature drops like a rock tossed off a canyon wall. And that's where shelter comes in. Or more accurately, the sad frontier approximation of it. If you're traveling light, you sleep in a canvas tent. Not the fancy kind. Not the kind with flaps and ropes and poles that fit together like puzzle pieces. No. You've got a single sheet of waxed canvas, stretched between two sticks, barely taller than your knees. It keeps the snow off your chest, maybe. The wind? It laughs at your canvas like it's a practical joke. You lay under it in your bedroll, curled up like a possum in winter, trying not to move too much because every twitch lets the cold in. You pray it doesn't rain, because if it does, you're not camping. You're drowning slowly in a damp cocoon of your own regret. If you're lucky, you find a cabin. But luck doesn't visit often out here. The average cabin in the Wild West isn't what you imagine. It's not the cozy log home with smoke curling from a stone chimney. It's a box. A box of wood, often unseasoned, often unfinished, often built by someone with more whiskey than carpentry skill. The walls don't meet cleanly at the corners. Gaps let in the wind. The roof leaks. The door doesn't shut fully unless you kick it 3 times and shove a rock against it. There's no insulation, no plaster, no caulking. Just logs, stacked and sealed with mud, straw, and lies. Inside, it's darker than you expect. The windows are small, if there are any, and covered in oilcloth or animal bladder instead of glass. The light from your fire barely touches the corners. Shadows live here. So do spiders, and mice, and the occasional skunk if you forgot to block the chimney. There's no bed. Maybe a wooden frame with rope strung across it. Or maybe just the floor. The floor is cold. Dirt, packed hard by years of boots and blood. Sometimes it's covered in straw, sometimes not. Either way, you'll sleep in your coat, with your boots on, wrapped in every blanket you own, and still wake up shivering. The fireplace? It exists, technically. It smokes half the time. It creaks like it's haunted. The chimney may or may not actually reach outside. You hang a pot over the coals and hope it doesn't fall in. And when the fire dies in the middle of the night, which it always does, you wake up to your breath clouding in the air, and a deep, ancient cold that crawls up your spine like it owns you. And let's not forget about pests. The West doesn't care how tired you are. If there's warmth, there are visitors. Lice, fleas, mosquitoes in the warmer months, rats that chew through saddlebags, spiders that sleep in your boots, scorpions that think your pillow looks inviting. You learn to shake out your clothes every morning, shake out your blanket, shake out your boots, shake out your sense of security. You never really relax in your shelter. You hide in it, from the wind, from the dark, from whatever might be creeping through the brush, while you try to pretend that the scratching sound is just a squirrel. You want rest. But the Wild West doesn't offer that for free. You curl up under your crusty blanket, boots on, knife close, back to the fire. The wind whistles outside. The roof groans, and your clothing, scratchy, heavy, smoke-scented, is the only armor you have between you and the 1,000 tiny miseries waiting to sink in when the cold finally wins. There's no such thing as free time in the Wild West. There's no idle morning, no leisurely stretch while birds chirp and a kettle sings gently in the kitchen. The West doesn't do gentle. It does survival. and survival has a tight schedule. You're not living, you're enduring. And endurance means labor, every single day. Work so constant, so grinding, that your hands forget what it means to feel clean. You wake stiff, sore, hungry, and immediately start doing. Chopping wood, the eternal chore. If you've got a fire going, it means you burned wood last night. That means you need more wood today. The fire doesn't care about your feelings. It just eats. You pull yourself up, shoulders aching, and grab the axe. It's dull. It's always dull. You keep promising yourself you'll sharpen it, but by the time the day's over, you can barely lift your arms. You head to the woodpile, if you have one. If not, you're chopping logs right from a fallen tree. You brace one, line up the blade, and swing. The sound is satisfying, but the jolt up your spine isn't. The axe bounces. You adjust. Swing again. Eventually, the wood splits, not cleanly, not politely, but enough to burn. You do this again, and again, and again, because in the Wild West, heat isn't free. You pay for it in sweat, splinters, and lower back pain that makes grown men weep into their coffee, if they had any. Fetching water, one bucket at a time. You carry water from the creek, if it hasn't frozen solid, or from the well, if you're lucky enough to be near one. That means 2 buckets, one in each hand, sloshing cold water down your pant legs and soaking through your socks. It's heavy, not gym heavy, not, oh, this is a good workout heavy. This is spine-shortening, shoulder-ripping, tendon-tearing heavy. And you don't do it once. You do it all day, for the fire, for the animals, for washing, for cooking. Even if you're alone, you go through gallons. And if you're not, if you've got a wife, a kid, a ranch hand, double it, triple it. Water is life. But life is inconvenient out here. And don't drop the bucket. If you do, that's a half-hour round trip, wasted. And if it happens at sundown, well, you better like the taste of regret in your mouth, because you're sleeping thirsty. Tending the animals. If you've got livestock, even 1 horse or a couple chickens, congratulations. You've got coworkers. Loud, hungry, pooping coworkers. You check your horse first. He survived the night. Barely. His breath still clouds the air. You rub down his legs, check his hooves, break the ice in his water trough with a rock. You feed him oats or dry grass or stale cornmeal, whatever you've got. You whisper to him, not because you're sentimental, but because if he dies, you're walking. The chickens? If you have any, they're mad. Cold, loud, irritated birds who lay fewer eggs the lower the temperature drops. You clean their coop, gather eggs, get pecked, curse at them under your breath like a disgruntled farmer priest. Maybe you've got a mule, maybe a cow. Every animal is a walking chore list. And every chore starts before your coffee has finished boiling, if you even had any. And if something's sick, that's your whole day. You'll be out there with a rusted tin of lard, a bone needle, and the kind of veterinary skills you picked up from a trapper who once cured a goat with whiskey and prayer. Fencing, fixing, failing. The fence is always broken, always. Whether it's the wind, the cattle, or some passing critter that decided to test the strength of your handiwork, it fails, and you fix it, post by post, wire by wire, with gloves full of holes, a hammer that keeps slipping, and a mouthful of nails because your pouch broke 2 weeks ago. Your cabin, It leaks. The roof sags. One of the boards is warping because of last month's snowmelt. The door squeaks like a haunted violin. You make a mental note to fix it. Then another mental note not to die before you fix it. You patch a hole in your coat with fishing line. You tie up the saddle with baling twine. You shove a bit of cloth into the boot that's starting to split. Everything here breaks. Everything, including you. Trapping, hunting, starving lightly. If you want meat, you earn it. There's no grocery store. No polite butcher wrapping steaks in paper and smiling. You set traps the night before. Check them in the morning. Maybe you've caught a rabbit. Maybe a squirrel. Maybe something with more teeth than you'd prefer. You skin it fast, hands numb, knife dull. If it's a good day, you've got stew. If it's a bad day, you boil bones and pretend it's broth, or chew more jerky until your jaw begs for mercy. You shoot only when necessary. Bullets aren't cheap. Powder's precious. And one missed shot could mean a lost meal and a long walk home. Sometimes you don't hunt because you can't. Snow's too deep, wind too sharp, game too smart. So you sit by the fire, chewing stale bread, and pretending it tastes like venison. Daylight dies. Fast, you don't get a full day. The sun might rise slowly, but it drops fast, like it's in a hurry to get away from this place. You glance at the sky, gauging the color. Pale blue, then gold, then that strange bruised shade that means you've got maybe 1 hour left. You stack wood higher. You refill the water. You double-check the animals. You clean your rifle. You pray nothing goes wrong at night. Because if it does, there's no help coming. Not for hours. Not ever. Your hands tell the story. They're cracked. Black under the nails. Calloused like stone. Bleeding in the corners. Splinters in 3 fingers. Burn marks across your palm from the time you tried to grab a fallen pan too fast. Your hands don't shake because you're tired. They shake because they don't know anything else now. The nerves have forgotten what softness feels like. Out here, they're your tools, your defense, your everything, and you still treat them like spare parts. You collapse onto a crate by the fire, shirt soaked, shoulders screaming. Another day behind you, another long, slow bruise of a night ahead. This isn't adventure. It's attrition. And you're not conquering the West. You're surviving it. One splinter, one bucket, one broken fence at a time. The West wasn't just a landscape of dust and danger. It was also haunted. Not by ghosts, necessarily, but by ideas. Strange, sacred, and sometimes just barely stitched together. After a long day of labor, as the fire crackles low and the wind starts to howl against the edges of your shelter, your thoughts drift. Not to comfort, not to peace, but to protection, because out here, logic doesn't keep you alive. Luck does, and luck is slippery, easily offended, quick to leave if you forget to show respect. So you cling to whatever rituals you've gathered. From your mama's kitchen Bible to the trapper's tale of a spirit that lives in the rocks. The Wild West wasn't just built with timber and sweat. It was built with superstition. The Bible in one hand, a talisman in the other. You probably carry a small Bible. Not because you read it daily, but because it's armor. A spiritual shield. It might be wrapped in cloth, tucked into your saddlebag, worn soft and thin from years of rough hands. Sometimes you open it, read a line, any line. Doesn't matter what it says, as long as it's something. You might whisper the Lord's Prayer when crossing a river. You might make the sign of the cross before every sunrise. You might refuse to travel on a Sunday, even if the wolves are closer than the next town. But you're not just Christian, because out here, faith gets mixed. You also tie a rabbit's foot to your coat button. You nail a horseshoe upside down over the barn door to catch luck like rainwater. You never say thank you out loud after someone compliments your horse. That brings misfortune. Every ranch hand knows that. And if your coffee spills before noon, you dump the rest. Bad omen, bad day. Better to go without than drink cursed grounds. Omens, whispers, and the weird rules you don't break. You follow rules you can't explain. Not because they make sense, but because not following them feels like asking for trouble. Never leave your boots upside down. That invites the devil. Never count the stars. You'll count your own days short. Never sleep with a mirror uncovered. Spirits can crawl through. If you hear your name whispered in the wind, don't answer. That's not your friend. That's something else. Some folks carry medicine bags, pouches of herbs, bones, or carved tokens. Not always Christian. Sometimes passed down. Sometimes bought from a native trader who didn't explain what was inside, just that it worked. You don't open it. You don't ask questions. You just keep it close when you sleep in a strange place. Church. When you can find it out. On the frontier, churches were rare. A chapel might sit 40 miles away. A clapboard shack with a preacher who comes once a month and a piano that's missing half its keys. The pews are warped. The roof leaks. But people come anyway. They come hungry. For a sermon, yes, but also for order, for rhythm, for rules. Out here, the world is too big, too wild. God gives it borders. Even if they're made of shaky wood and bad hymns. When the preacher talks about sin, everyone listens, but not because they're worried about drinking or swearing. No, they're worried about missteps, forgetting to pray before riding out, cursing at your child too close to sunset, stealing from a neighbor and wondering if that's why your cow gave birth dead. Everything has meaning out here, and not all of it is written in Scripture. Death, ghosts, and that feeling in the back of your neck. You've seen death. Everyone has. The West is full of shallow graves and deeper regrets. Someone dies on the trail. You bury them fast. Mark the spot if you can. Say a few words. Sometimes you lie. Say they were braver than they were. Cleaner. More ready to meet the Lord. And after they're gone, you watch. Because death doesn't always stay buried. You hear stories. A light seen walking the ridge at night. Footprints in the snow that stop in the middle of nowhere. A cry, soft and childlike, coming from the sagebrush just after midnight. You don't go looking. That's rule 1. If something calls to you from the dark, you don't answer. You don't investigate. You stoke the fire higher. You say your prayers, even if you don't mean them. You whisper to the dirt to stay still. The old ways, still alive in pockets. Not everyone out here is white. Not everyone prays to the same God. You meet a Chinese railroad worker who lights incense before eating, bows to the mountain, and tells you that some places shouldn't be walked through after sundown. You listen. You meet a Mexican vaquero who wears a rosary and mutters protection prayers in Spanish every time lightning flashes. You watch. You meet an Apache elder who doesn't smile, doesn't blink, but tells you to move your camp 3 feet to the left. You move it. No questions asked, because the Wild West is layered with old knowledge. Sacred hills, cursed rivers, names you don't say, stones you don't turn over. Some of the settlers scoff. Call it native nonsense. They're the ones who wake up screaming. Witch signs, hexes, and unexplained luck. You've seen the marks carved above door frames. Protective sigils, charms against sickness. Sometimes it's just a triangle. Sometimes it's a circle of salt no one talks about. You've seen strings of feathers tied above baby cribs. Bottles filled with nails and buried under the threshold. There are whispers about prairie witches, not broomstick-riding hags, but women with dried herbs, strange eyes, and too many cats. They live outside town, sell teas that cure your cough, charms that keep the coyotes away. You don't ask where their knowledge came from. You don't ask what they want in return. Because out here, belief is what fills the silence. The Wild West is quiet, but not peaceful. It's too quiet sometimes. At night, when the wind dies, when the coyotes don't howl, when the fire burns just a little too low, that's when belief creeps in. You feel it, that low hum in your bones, that instinct that tells you someone or something is watching. Not with malice, just presence. So you mumble a prayer, grip your cross, touch the pouch in your coat, add one more log to the fire, not because it's cold, but because something just moved outside, and you're not ready to meet it. You don't eat to enjoy, you eat to not die. But sometimes, when the stew's hot and the fiddle's playing, even the Wild West feels almost human. After the work is done, or at least paused, you finally get to think about food. That's a generous term. Fuel might be closer, because meals in the Wild West weren't about flavor, texture, or presentation. They were about calories. Anything that could be chewed, boiled, or fried without killing you was fair game. And as for entertainment, you didn't have much time for that either. But when it happened, when the work slowed, the sun dipped low, and someone pulled out a jug or a fiddle, you took it. You held it in your cracked hands like warmth itself. Dinner on the trail. Hope in a tin pot. You're cooking over a fire again. Same setup, different night. A single pot, blackened by years of ash and neglect, hangs over the flames. Inside, a stew, barely. Maybe a rabbit, if the traps were kind. Maybe just beans, onions, and grease. The smell's not bad. It's just neutral, vaguely edible. You toss in some wild herbs you picked earlier, hoping they're not poisonous. You don't really know what they are. They smell green. That's enough. You stir slowly, watching bubbles rise like exhausted ghosts. Your mouth waters, not from desire but from pure instinct. You're not excited. You're starving. The first bite burns your tongue. The second scalds your throat. The third, you don't remember. You're already halfway through the tin bowl before your brain catches up. There's bread, hardtack again. You soak it in the stew, let it soften, chew like you're gnawing through old rope. There's salt pork, too, if it hasn't spoiled. It's greasy, rubbery. You swallow fast and pretend it's something fancier. And if you're really lucky, someone brought coffee, strong, bitter, black as gun oil. You cradle the tin mug like it's sacred. You sip slow, savoring the burn. Even if it tastes like charred beans and creek water, it's hot. And that's enough. Taverns, if you can find one. If you're near a settlement or passing through a town, there's a saloon. And if you've got a few coins left that weren't spent on ammo or horse feed, you might step inside. The light is low, always. One lantern hanging from a crooked beam. The floor's sticky, the table's uneven. The smell? A mix of whiskey, sweat, bad cigars, and the faintest trace of something that might once have been chilly. You don't order from a menu. You ask what's left, and the barkeep tells you with a shrug. Usually beans, maybe salted beef, maybe a pie, but only if it was baked today. And today might mean a few days ago. You eat fast, with your fingers. You drink faster, not because you're thirsty, but because it softens the edges of reality. A shot of whiskey goes down like fire, then settles in your gut like a warm argument. It doesn't fix anything, but it helps you care less. Food spoils, fast. You've lost food to heat, cold, mice, mold, and your own stupidity. Sometimes you bite into something and your mouth says, nope, but you eat it anyway. Because when your options are probably bad or definitely nothing, you take the risk. Meat goes sour, bread goes moldy. Milk, forget it. There's no refrigeration, no expiration dates, just your nose and your best guess. People died from bad stew, from old butter, from sausage left out too long. You might not even know what killed you. One day your stomach cramps. The next you can't stand. The third, well, you're done. It wasn't rare. It was just Tuesday. Drinks, water, whiskey, and Russian. You drink when you can. Water's scarce. Clean water, even more so. You boil it when possible, or strain it through cloth, or add whiskey and hope. Sometimes you melt snow. Sometimes you drink straight from a creek and cross your fingers. Whiskey's safer. Technically, it doesn't spoil. It kills most things, including judgment. Men drank to forget. Women drank to cope. Cowboys drank because their bones rattled from long rides. Preachers drank when no one was looking. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't cheerful. It was just necessary. Company, music, and moments of something like joy then, sometimes, a miracle. Someone pulls out a harmonica, a fiddle, a banjo, a tin whistle. Doesn't matter if it's tuned. Doesn't matter if they're good. It's music. People gather close. Boots tapping the dirt. Shoulders loosening. Someone starts to sing. A song from back east. Or from Ireland. Or from nowhere at all. The lyrics don't matter. It's rhythm that keeps you warm. Hands clapping. Firelight dancing. That feeling, rare, brief, that you're not alone in the world. There's laughter. Sloppy, ragged, real. Someone tells a joke that's older than the hills. Someone else tries to dance. You join in. You forget, for a minute, that you've got 3 broken ribs and a boil on your thigh. This is entertainment in the West. No stage, no tickets, just noise and laughter, and the fragile joy of people pretending things are okay. Games and gambles. Cards mostly. Poker, faro. Maybe dice, you throw down coins or buttons or teeth if things get desperate. You play by half-known rules. You bluff. You curse. You cheat if you can. Fights break out. Of course they do. Someone flips the table. Someone gets thrown into the street. A chair breaks over someone's back. And 15 minutes later, it's quiet again. Cards get reshuffled. The game continues. Because what else is there to do? Holidays and gatherings. Sometimes the towns throw a social, a barn dance, a Sunday picnic. It doesn't matter if your shoes are falling apart. You go. Everyone goes. You wear your cleanest shirt, the one with the fewest stains. Women wear dresses. Children scrub their faces until they shine like little lanterns. There's food, pies, biscuits, cold fried chicken. Someone brings preserves. Someone else butchers a hog. For one night, it's like you live in a world that isn't slowly trying to kill you. There's dancing, music, flirting, people smiling so wide it hurts their cheeks. And when the music fades and the pies are gone and the lanterns flicker out, people ride home slow, quiet, like they've touched something sacred and know they won't see it again for a long, long time. You fall asleep that night with a full belly, a little whiskey in your blood, and a tune still echoing faintly in your ears. It won't last. But for one night, it was enough. You wake up feeling wrong, not cold wrong, not sore wrong, but deep wrong. A heat in your chest, a rattle in your breath, and a thought in your mind. This might be the one that gets me. In the Wild West, sickness didn't announce itself with warning lights or polite reminders. It snuck in, through your lungs, your gut, a splinter, a single drink of bad water. And once it took hold, it rarely let go. There were no hospitals, no antibiotics, no comfort in knowing what was wrong. You got sick, and then you waited, either to get better or to stop being a problem. The common cold wasn't so common. Even the easy illnesses could end you. A cold could turn to pneumonia. A sore throat could turn to an abscess. A small cut could fester into a swollen, pus-filled death sentence. You didn't rest in bed with tea and tissues. You worked through it. You coughed while chopping wood. You vomited behind the barn. You wiped sweat off your brow and prayed you'd make it to sundown. You didn't have the luxury of being sick. But sickness didn't care. Fever was a death bell. When someone got a fever, everyone got nervous. It started slow. Chills, aching joints, maybe a sore back. Then came the sweat, then the heat, then the shaking. You laid them in bed, covered them in blankets, gave them willow bark tea if you had any, maybe whiskey, maybe prayers, usually both. If they started talking nonsense, seeing things that weren't there, that was the fever brain, the final stage. They'd mumble names, cry out for dead relatives, argue with invisible shadows, and then silence. Sometimes they pulled through. Most times, they didn't. Wounds that wouldn't heal get kicked by a horse, shot by a stray bullet, or jabbed with a rusty nail. That might be your last story. You didn't go to the doctor. You were the doctor. Or your neighbor was. Or someone who once read a medical almanac while drunk. They'd clean the wound with whiskey, wrap it with linen, and hope. Maybe they'd burn it with a hot iron to kill the sickness. Maybe they'd cut it open and drain the pus. Maybe they'd just say a prayer and walk away. Tetanus, sepsis, gangrene. You wouldn't know the names. You'd just watch the limb turn dark, start to smell, stop moving, and eventually start dying before you did. If it got bad enough, they'd amputate. Right there on the kitchen table, a belt between your teeth, a saw in someone's hand, and a bowl of screaming for dessert. And if you survived, you were lucky, and missing a leg. Doctors were a roll of the dice. Some doctors knew their stuff. Civil War veterans, traveling physicians with real experience. Most? Snake oil salesmen in a suit 2 sizes too large, offering miracle tonics made of alcohol, opium, and lies. They'd sell you a bottle of Dr. Farnsworth's vital elixir, promise it'd cure your cough, straighten your spine, and make your children obedient. You'd drink it, fall asleep for 18 hours, and wake up, still coughing, but slightly drunk. Even legitimate doctors had limited tools: a bone saw, a jar of leeches, a needle dipped in fire. They meant well, usually, but medicine in the 1800s was equal parts guesswork and grim resignation. Childhood was a gamble. Children died, often, quietly, without warning. A fever, a rash, a cough that wouldn't stop, a belly that swelled, a tiny body that stopped moving. You buried them behind the house. You carved a name into wood. You didn't talk about it. Not much. Mothers learned to love cautiously. Fathers built small coffins alongside the chicken coops. No one expected all their children to live. They hoped, but they didn't expect it. Women and the grave of childbirth. For women, death came with the cradle. Childbirth was violent, bleeding, tearing, infections, breech births, stillbirths, twins that never made it past morning. You lay on a bed of straw or rough blankets, surrounded by other women. A midwife with strong hands. No painkillers, no surgeon. Just grit, boiling water, and someone to hold your head. You screamed, you bled, you prayed, and if the baby lived, and you did too, they called it a blessing. But sometimes the blessing was buried before it had a name. Epidemics. The unseen posse cholera, typhoid, diphtheria, smallpox. They arrived like ghosts. One person would feel sick, then another, then 5, then a dozen. Towns emptied out. Saloons closed. Mail stopped arriving. Whole families disappeared within days. Left behind were silent cabins, half-cooked meals, and graves dug too shallow to hold the sorrow. No one knew how disease worked. Not really. Some blamed bad water. Some blamed sin. Some blamed the wind. You burned clothes, poured lye in the well, nailed boards over windows, and you waited. Home remedies, herbs, and hope. If you were lucky, someone in town knew the old ways, an herbalist, a midwife, a trapper with a bag of dried roots and suspicious experience. They'd boil mullein leaves for lungs, apply comfrey poultices to bruises, brew yarrow tea for fevers, tie garlic around your neck, and chant words they wouldn't explain. Was it science? Was it superstition? Did it matter? You drank what they gave you, because it was something. And when you got better, if you got better, you believed. The fear never left. You might laugh at death by day, joke about rattlers, gunfights, falling off your horse drunk. But at night, when your chest felt tight, when your breath caught, when a chill wouldn't leave your spine, you feared. You lay awake, staring at the roof, listening to your own heartbeat like it was a time bomb. Every cough made you pause. Every headache made you wonder. Every twinge of pain made you remember someone who never woke up. You didn't ask, "Will I live a long life?" You asked, "Will I see the spring?" And if you did, you didn't celebrate with fireworks. You just exhaled and got back to work. There's no such thing as just a woman or just a child in the Wild West. There's no such thing as childhood at all. Just smaller hands doing bigger work, and women bearing the weight of entire households and entire tragedies in silence. If you're a woman in the Wild West, you don't rest. You don't relax. You don't get to pause. Every day, from the moment the rooster crows or the baby cries, you're moving, lifting, cooking, hauling, teaching, bleeding, burying, holding the entire world together with fraying thread. And if you're a child, you work, you obey, you learn fast or die early. There is no softness. There is no margin for error. There is only the family, the land, and the endless cycle of trying not to lose either. A woman's role. Everything, always. You don't just keep house. You are the house. You wake before dawn, stir the ashes, fetch water, grind cornmeal, cook breakfast. Not because you're hungry, but because everyone else will be soon. You sweep a dirt floor, patch holes in clothes, milk the cow, chop vegetables, kill chickens, boil laundry in a pot so large it could double as a coffin, and sometimes does. You sew, you mend. You teach your daughters how to do all of it too, because you won't be around forever. And someone has to know how to make soup from a single bone and how to deliver a baby in a thunderstorm. And when your husband's away, on a cattle drive, in a mine, in a bottle, you do his work too. You carry the rifle when the coyotes come. You shoot. You skin. You drag the carcass back. You plant the seeds. You dig the graves. You bury the child and still cook dinner for the rest of the family that same night. No time for grief. Not in the Wild West. Marriage. Not romance, just reality. You probably married young. 16 maybe. 14 if times were tight. It wasn't about love. It was about survival. A man with land needed help. A girl without land needed food. That was the deal. You were traded between households like a handshake. Maybe you liked him. Maybe you didn't. It didn't matter. Once the papers were signed, or once you moved in, it was done. Divorce? Not a word anyone said out loud. Abuse? Not something the neighbors interfered with. Unhappiness? That was something you swallowed, alongside cold stew and missed chances. Childbirth, the most dangerous job. It starts with a cramp. Then the water breaks. Then the waiting begins. You lie back on rough cloth, legs parted, pain coming in waves that feel like the earth cracking beneath you. There's no anesthesia, no doctor unless you're in a big town. And even then, he might not make it. Your midwife is your neighbor, or your sister, or a stranger who once helped birth a goat and is now considered qualified. The room is silent except for your screams, then a baby's cry, if you're lucky. Then the blood. Sometimes it won't stop. Sometimes the afterbirth won't come. Sometimes the baby's cold, blue, silent. Sometimes you die. Right there, with a hand on your stomach and a hymn on someone's lips. And if you survive, you get up the next day and make breakfast. Children, born to work, born to risk. Childhood ends early. 6 years old, time to carry water. 7, time to tend animals. 8, you're chopping kindling and patching trousers. Toys are carved from scrap wood. Dolls are made from corn husks and hope. Playtime is the 5 minutes before bedtime when you're not too tired to move. Boys learn the rifle young. They shoot rats before they shoot rabbits. Rabbits before deer. Eventually, they'll shoot men, if they live long enough. Girls learn the fire, the pot, the spindle. They sew tiny clothes with aching fingers and help raise their younger siblings before they know how to spell their own names. School? Maybe. If there's a schoolhouse nearby. If there's not a blizzard. If the family can spare the help. They walk miles to get there. Sit in cold rooms. Learn letters on slate boards with nubs of chalk. If they're lucky, they learn to read. Maybe even write a letter to a cousin back east. But mostly, they learn how to survive. Family meals, quiet, hard, holy. Dinner is a ritual, not fancy, not filling, but sacred in its own way. Everyone eats together, in silence mostly. There's no TV, no phones, just the scrape of spoons, the clink of tin cups, and the occasional sigh from someone trying not to look at the empty space where a loved one used to sit. You eat what you have. Beans, cornbread, stew, always stew. No one complains. No one asks for seconds unless they're offered. Hunger isn't a crisis. It's a constant. You talk about the weather, the harvest, the trap line, the rumors of wolves or war. No one says they're scared, but they are. Mourning, if there's time. When a family member dies, you wrap them in their blanket. If you have a coffin, you build it. If not, you dig. Deep enough to keep the animals out. Shallow enough to do before sundown. There are no professional mourners, no therapists, just silence, and soup, and a long night. Children don't cry for long. They've seen too many funerals to weep like they used to. Mothers cry only when no one's looking. Fathers cry into their sleeves behind the barn, the bond that kept you alive. Families in the West weren't perfect. They yelled, they beat, they failed, but they also held each other when the nights got too cold. They shared boots, blankets, secrets, prayers. They survived together, or they didn't survive. Tough at all. Even in the silence, love was there. Not in flowers or poems or sweet words, but in mended socks, a saved biscuit, a hand reaching out in the dark just to make sure you're still there. You sleep tonight between two children, one on each arm, their breath warm against your side. Your husband's boots sit by the fire, steaming. Your daughter's doll lies face down in the dust. The wind groans through the cracks in the wall. You close your eyes and hope tomorrow doesn't take anyone else. It's past noon. The sun is too high, too hot, and now the real work begins. Not just the chores, but the people. And people, more often than not, are the problem. There's a myth about the Wild West, that everyone was equal, that it was a place where a man could reinvent himself, that justice rode into town on a white horse. Reality was far less romantic. The afternoons weren't filled with duels and showdowns. They were filled with grudges, land disputes, stolen livestock, and punishments that didn't wait for courts. The sun cooked the land, tempers cooked under hats, and civilization was often held together with rope, rifles, and whoever shouted loudest. Work doesn't stop. It shifts. By now, you've already hauled water, mended something, fed someone, and cut yourself at least once. But the real business of the day, it's not physical, it's social. The neighbor comes by, not to chat. Not really. He wants to talk about the fence line. Again. Says your cow stepped over, ate his corn, again. You don't remember it happening, but he does. Or claims he does. You stare at him, sweaty hat in hand, one hand resting on your hip, where the pistol usually sits. This is how most problems start. Not with a bang, but with a disagreement that has nowhere to go but worse. Land, the root of all arguments. The West was nothing if not full of land, but not all of it was truly yours. The deeds were shaky, the surveys inconsistent. A line scratched into the dirt last season might now cross someone else's claim. You fight over rivers, trees, hillsides, mineral rights. People have been shot for less than a boundary line. Some folks file lawsuits, others file bullets. Justice, or the closest thing to it, if a real court exists, it's 100 miles away, run by a judge who drinks before lunch and remembers faces better than laws. More likely, justice comes from who's willing to act first. A man steals a horse, and he hangs. No trial, no delay. You find a tree, a rope, and a group of people just angry enough to watch it happen. Cattle rustlers, too. That's not just theft. It's warfare out here. Branding irons get involved. Guns come out. And if someone misreads a brand in the heat, there's no going back. The sheriff, overworked, underpaid, occasionally sober. You might have a sheriff, a man with a tin star, a strong chin, and a deep well of poor decisions. He walks the town once a day, breaking up fights with a nightstick and his own reputation. Sometimes he's brave, sometimes he's drunk, sometimes he's both. He jails the loud, ignores the rich, and hopes the quiet don't cause too much trouble. If you need help, you might not get it. If you cause trouble, you'll definitely get noticed. Sheriffs rarely last more than a year without a bullet, a bribe, or both. Vigilantes. The mob wears a mask. When justice doesn't show up, the mob does. Men in dusters and wide-brimmed hats, guns loaded, faces hard. They drag the accused from their shack, or from the jailhouse, or from their own dinner table. They don't ask questions, they read them aloud, and pronounce judgment with the drop of a lever or the pull of a trigger. You don't have to be guilty. You just have to be in the way. And everyone watches, because it's better than becoming the next one in the noose. Class. Not everyone's equal. Out here you might be poor. You might own nothing but your boots and your pride. The man down the road owns 500 head of cattle, 20 hired hands, and the sheriff's ear. He gets away with things you'd be shot for. His fence crosses into public land. No one bats an eye. You trap a rabbit from the wrong side of a hill? Suddenly, it's your hide on the line. Justice in the West wears a wallet, and poverty always looks suspicious. Race. The uneven West. Let's not sugarcoat it. If you're black, Mexican, Chinese, or native, you live in a different West entirely. Laws barely protect you. Society doesn't respect you. And survival means twice the work for half the reward. A white man steals a horse, he might see jail. A Chinese laborer gets accused, he vanishes. A black family farms land too close to town, they wake up to torches. This isn't the equal frontier. It's the brutal, biased edge of a world that hasn't learned how to treat people like people. And if you're in that minority, you learn quickly. Keep your head down, work harder, trust fewer, and never walk into a room where you're outnumbered. Religion. Holy ground. Heated fights. Even churches aren't safe from conflict. The Methodist preacher says dancing is sin. The Baptists say wine is wicked. The Catholics light candles and get called superstitious. Everyone believes they're right. And out here, theology can lead to fistfights behind the outhouse. Faith is strong, but pride is stronger. Women and the silent struggle. You're not in the saloon, you're not in the courtroom, but you see everything. The looks, the threats, the drunken hands that don't care if your husband's 2 feet away. Women aren't just homemakers. They're peacekeepers, gossip traders, and the quiet enforcers of community rules. They know who's cheating, who's stealing, who's dying, long before anyone else. And when the men are done shouting, shooting, and storming off, the women rebuild whatever's left. Again, children caught in the middle. They see the fights. They hear the lies. They watch a town drift toward violence like a dry field toward a spark. And they learn quickly. Keep secrets. Speak only when asked. Watch who's in charge, not by title, but by fear. Because kids in the West don't get to stay kids. They grow up under the weight of guns, rumors, and the look in their father's eyes when another mom walks through the door with a loaded question. The afternoon wears on by late day. Tensions settle or explode. Someone rides off in a cloud of dust. Someone else stares at a rope knot a little too long. You chop wood harder. Watch the sun dip low. Wonder if tomorrow will be better. Probably not. But you'll try anyway. Because in the Wild West, grudges last longer than crops. And sometimes surviving the social world is harder than surviving the wilderness. The sun's gone. Again. And now comes the part of the day that everyone dreads. The part where the dark forgets how to be quiet, and everything you love feels too far away to protect. Night in the Wild West isn't peaceful. It isn't romantic. It's dangerous. The same plains that looked wide and empty at noon now feel too full. The wind sounds different. The shadows move differently. The noises that were nothing a few hours ago now sound intentional. And deep inside you, in your bones, in your belly, in that small animal part of your brain that no longer trusts doors, you know what night means. It means you're not safe anymore. Fires die too quickly. You keep the fire going. Always. You feed it with the last of your dry wood. You shield it with your body when the wind picks up. You watch it like it owes you a favor, because when the fire goes out, the cold comes in. And the cold doesn't knock. It slides through cracks. It climbs inside your boots. It presses down on your chest while you sleep. It makes you question whether your heart is still beating or just pretending to. You try to sleep by the flame, curled tight, blanket around your ears, hat pulled low, one eye open, always one. What you hear at night. Every sound is a threat. A branch snapping, a horse snorting, a dog whining low in its throat, not barking, just warning. You hear footsteps and tell yourself it's nothing. You hear scratching and pray it's a raccoon. You hear silence, too much silence, and wonder if something's already watching you. Coyotes yip in the distance, then closer, then maybe too close. Owls call, something rustles in the brush. A scream, human or animal you don't know, rises and then cuts off like a rope snapped mid-sentence. You don't investigate. You don't go outside. You wait. Your door is not a wall. If you have a cabin, your front door is a single plank of wood on a rusted hinge. It doesn't lock. Not really. Maybe there's a crossbar. Maybe a chain. But any man who wants in badly enough will get in. And so you listen. You stare at that door like it might betray you, because sometimes it does. A stranger knocks. A drunk stumbles up from town. A neighbor, or what's left of one, shows up with fever in his eyes and no good reason to be on your porch at this hour. You keep your rifle close. You don't greet after sundown. You say, "Keep riding," and hope they do, sleeping outside. If you're out in the open, on the trail under the stars, there is no door. There is no protection. There is only canvas, a flickering fire, and the slow spiral of fear building as the temperature drops. You roll tight in your blanket. You put your back to a rock. You angle yourself so no one can sneak up behind you. Your horse shifts. You grip your knife. You hear breathing, not yours, and then realize it's just the wind through the tall grass. Probably what kills you at night. Lots of things. Cold, mostly. You can freeze without realizing it, especially if you're tired, wet, or foolish enough to think a small fire is enough. Animals, too. Wolves almost never attack. Almost. But coyotes will steal your food. Bears will break into your shelter. A mountain lion can stalk you for miles without a sound. Snakes, scorpions, silent killers in your bedroll. And sometimes, people. Bandits don't attack at noon. They come at dusk, when you've let your guard down, when you're eating, when your gun is just out of reach. They knock, or they don't. They take. And sometimes, they don't leave anyone to tell about it. The death you don't expect, then there's the quiet kind. You go to bed with a cough. You wake up drowning in your own lungs. You go to bed with a sore tooth. You wake up with your jaw locked and the poison spreading. You go to bed with a full belly, finally, and your heart just stops. You never know. And that's the part that gnaws at you. Burial plans. You don't want to make you think about what would happen if you died in your sleep. Would someone find you? Would your body be picked clean by scavengers before anyone came? Would your family know? Would anyone say a prayer? You think about the letter in your saddlebag, the one you never mailed, the one that just says, "Tell Ma I made it far. Not sure I'll make it farther." The dream of a peaceful night. Sometimes, just sometimes, it's quiet enough to dream. You dream of a real bed, a stove crackling warm, a window that closes, a woman's voice humming in another room, a dog curled at your feet, a child's drawing on the wall. You wake up. It's just you, the fire, the wind, and that ache in your chest that never really leaves anymore. You stretch. You listen. You wait for morning. You're still alive. And you're still afraid. You're still here. Somehow. Another day in the West. Done. Not finished. Just survived. And maybe that's enough. The fire is low now. Just a faint orange glow in the darkness. Your body aches in places you didn't know you had. Your clothes are stiff. Your eyelids heavier than your boots. You didn't eat well. You didn't rest much. You spent the day working, watching, worrying. But you're still breathing. And out here, that's a victory. You've chopped wood until your shoulders felt like they'd break off. You've boiled water that tasted like ash and drank it like gold. You've listened for threats you couldn't see and ignored fears you couldn't explain. You've done what everyone did in the Wild West. Endured. Because this land wasn't tamed by grit or guns. It was endured, day by day, injury by injury, loss by quiet, unbearable loss. A world without softness. Nothing was easy. Nothing was gentle. Even love, even family, even laughter came laced with risk. You never knew how long anyone would stay. You never knew if the sunrise would bring a letter, a bullet, or just another broken wagon wheel to fix before breakfast. But somehow, people did it. They built cabins where there was nothing but wind. They buried children and planted corn in the same dirt. They told stories by firelight with tired eyes and half-empty stomachs. And when the wolves howled, they didn't flinch. Not because they weren't afraid, but because they were used to it. Modern comforts, taken for granted. Now, in your own bed, under real blankets, between solid walls, with clean water just a tap away, you may be listening to this wondering, why would anyone choose this life? Why risk the frostbite, the bandits, the diseases? Why cross plains and deserts with little more than a prayer and a pair of boots? But maybe it's not about choosing hardship. Maybe it's about chasing something else. Freedom, perhaps. Or escape. Or a dream someone whispered once, long ago. Of land, of quiet, of ownership. Even if that dream came with cracked hands, early graves, and nights so cold they bit into your bones. Even if the price was paid daily in sweat and blood. Even if the reward was just a roof, a child's laughter, and a morning where the coffee didn't taste like sorrow. Gratitude in stillness. So tonight, in this quiet moment, as you lie warm, truly warm, beneath your covers, consider the small mercies that history has handed you. You can sleep without a rifle at your side. You can brush your teeth with mint instead of pine ash. You can drink water that doesn't require boiling. You can use a bathroom without risking frostbite, fire ants, or public shame. You can flick a switch and summon light. You can send a message around the world in seconds. You can live to old age without ever burying your child. That's not guilt. That's gratitude. History didn't hand it to you easily. It was wrestled into existence by people who endured more than we can imagine. And now, it's yours. So take it. Breathe in. Exhale. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. You're not in the Wild West. Not anymore. The fire dies, but you're safe outside your window. The world is quiet. No coyotes. No boots on your porch. No wind rattling through unchinked logs. Just the hum of the fan. The soft rhythm of your own breath. The blanket warming the places where history once froze people to the bone. And now, finally, you can let go. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, you don't have to wake up in the Wild West. You don't have to boil your water, mend your socks, or check the traps before dawn. You don't have to bury the stew pot next to the rifle. You don't have to listen for footsteps that don't belong. You don't have to sleep with your boots on, your knife under your pillow, or your last letter unsent. You just have to rest, to breathe, to know that history is behind you now, and that you've made it safely out of that cold, creaking, lonely world. Sleep well.